Thank you very kindly. Good morning, everyone. Members of the jury, Inquest team,
Good morning.
members of the public. We're here this morning to receive the verdict in this inquest, but before we do that, there are a number of matters that I need to take up. First, there are a lot of people in the courtroom, and after the verdict there will doubtless be a lot of discussion, and there will be a lot of folks that will want to conduct interviews, and that's fine. However, in the interest of safety, I would just ask that we try to move in a kind of orderly way and not cause anyone else to be injured. So I appreciate if you do that. Also, out of respect for Ashley's memory, I would ask that during the reading of the verdict we try to minimize any outburst or any response, and that we reduce any talking or anything else that might detract from our ability to receive the verdict in its entirety. There are also several matters of housekeeping that it's important that I mention at this stage. Section 52(2) of the Coroner's Act says that after an inquest is concluded, the coroner shall, upon request, release documents and things put in evidence at the inquest to the lawful owner or person entitled to possession thereof. So I need to tell you that the exhibits will be held by the coroner's constable for 30 days following the receipt of the verdict, and that after that they will be released in accordance with Section 52(2) of the Coroner's Act. So if you are the owner of any of that property or entitled to possession, please take note of that and govern yourself accordingly. There are a lot of media here this morning. Welcome. You really are welcome, because a big part of the ability of the inquest to make an impact on society is that you make the public aware of the recommendations. So we welcome you here to do that. I say that only to preface a reminder to you that there is a rule that no person shall approach the jury at any time. I remind you that it may be a criminal offense to reveal or seek to have any person reveal the deliberations of the jury in the jury room. So no one will approach the jury at any time. Now the jury has reached a verdict. Let me explain to you how I know that. Under Section 31(2) of the Coroner's Act, the jury shall not make any finding of legal responsibility or express any conclusion of law. To be a true verdict, the recommendations contained in the verdict must arise from the evidence in the inquest. When the jury verdict is delivered by the jury, it is given to me and to my counsel, Ms. Spire and Ms. Creel, and it's our job to review it to make sure that those requirements have been met. We have done that, and we are satisfied that the verdict meets all those requirements in the Coroner's Act and is thus a true verdict, which can now be received. So, ladies and gentlemen, ladies of the jury, you have reached a verdict, and what is done in these proceedings at this stage is that I will read your verdict as you have recorded it, and I want you to follow closely, because at the end of my reading I'm going to ask you whether what I have read is your verdict. So you need to follow along and make sure that what I read is your verdict. It's important so that the public will hear it, so that it will be recorded in the record by our reporter. So I'm going to do that now. We'll start with the verdict. Verdict of the coroner's jury. We, the undersigned, the jury serving on the inquest into the death of Ashley Smith, find as follows. Name of the deceased, Ashley Smith, age 19 years. Inquest held at the Coroner's Court in Toronto from September 20th, 2012 to December 19th, 2013 by myself as coroner. Having been duly sworn or affirmed, have inquired into and determined the following. Name of the deceased, Ashley Smith. Date and time of death, October 19th, 2007 at 8:10 a.m. Place of death, St. Mary's General Hospital, Kitchener. Cause of death, ligature strangulation and positional asphyxia. By what means? Homicide. Recommendations. I'll read the headings and indicate them as headings. Headings, the Ashley Smith case study. We recommend, 1, that Ashley Smith's experience within the correctional system is taught as a case study to all Correctional Service of Canada management and staff at the institutional, regional, and national levels. This case study can demonstrate how the correctional system and federal provincial health care can collectively fail to provide an identified mentally ill, high-risk, high-needs inmate with the appropriate care, treatment, and support. This case study can also demonstrate the lack of communication, cohesiveness, and accountability of a large organization such as Correctional Service of Canada. 2, that the Ashley Smith case study be designed for all existing and future CSC management and staff, offering a comprehensive understanding and gaps analysis of the practices that occurred leading to this case. The case study will include documents and evidence presented throughout the Ashley Smith Coroner's Inquest, specifically the jury recommendations December 2013, report to coroner investigating the death of Ashley Smith at Grand Valley Institution for Women, GVI, October 11, 2013, University of Toronto, Professor Kelly Hannah Moffat, which is Exhibit 206. A preventable death, June 20, 2008, Correctional Investigator of Canada, pages 1 to 30, which is Exhibit 22, and the Ashley Smith Report, June 2008, Ombudsman and Child and Youth Advocate excerpts, which is Exhibit 6. New heading, the provision of mental health care to federally sentenced women. A, within penitentiaries. Recommendation 3, that within 72 hours of admission to any penitentiary or treatment facility, all female inmates will be assessed by a psychologist to determine whether any mental health issues or self-injurious behaviors exist. A, that should an inmate be identified as having high needs, mental health issues, and or self-injurious behavior, the Chief of Psychology will notify the institutional head, rights advisor, and inmate advocate. Footnote, the role of the rights advisor, inmate advocate is defined in recommendations 73 to 75, Women Offender Sector, and the Regional Complex Mental Health Committee in writing within 48 hours of assessment. B, that this process of assessment will continue to be conducted on an ongoing basis and as required by the inmate. C, that the Chief of Psychology implements a plan of effective treatment strategy which will be documented and shared as required. 4, that a full range of effective therapeutic interventions are A, individualized to the needs of female inmates considering her self-identified needs regardless of their security classification, status, or placement. B, enhanced to include de-escalation training and art, music, or pet therapy. C, trauma, age, and gender informed and developmentally appropriate. And D, determined and authorized by mental health staff. 5, that Correctional Service of Canada, hereinafter CSC, create a permanent peer support program with highly trained and qualified peer support workers in each of the women's penitentiaries that, A, is available to all women, including segregated women, and regardless of security status, upon their request, 24 hours a day. B, provides training and ongoing support for the peers by women-centered psychologists and social workers. C, ensures confidentiality between the female inmate and the peer to the greatest extent possible. D, can be utilized during an incident of self-injurious behavior if requested. And E, is offered to women actively engaged in self-injurious behavior or at risk of engaging in self-injurious behavior as a therapeutic intervention. 6, that CSC ensure nursing services are present on site for inmates on a 24-hour per day, 7-day per week basis, as well as available to staff for consultation. 7, that CSC access community mental health services by developing partnerships with external mental health experts. 8, that there be an adequate staffing of qualified mental health care providers with expertise and experience in treating a population with mental health issues, self-injurious behaviors, suicidality, and trauma at every women's institution to provide services and support to female inmates, These providers will include A, psychiatrists, B, psychiatric nurses or nurses, C, the chief psychologist. Footnote, it is further recommended that whether working in the position indeterminately or in an acting capacity, the chief psychologist must hold a PhD in clinical psychologist and be a member in good standing of the Ontario College of Psychologists or provincial equivalent. D, psychologists. E, social workers. F, behavioral counselors and recreational counselors. Footnote respecting behavioral counselors, it is further recommended that behavioral counselors have qualifications to counsel in behavior. Otherwise, it is recommended that the title of behavior counselors is amended to behavioral therapy coordinator. G, general practitioners, and H, other professional service providers as required. 9, that CSC expand the scope and terms of psychiatrists' contracts to enable them to fulfill their duties in a meaningful way. 10, that all staff providing mental health care will report to and be accountable to health care, not security, and that the therapeutic relationship should not be compromised by the assignment of security-focused assessments. 11, that CSC organize and fund secondments for the nursing staff to psychiatric wards of local Schedule I hospitals or other specialized mental health institutions. These secondments are to be of sufficient length and completed with regularity. This will ensure the continual improvement of their knowledge and skills in the provision of mental health care, services and supports to female inmates, and their knowledge of community nursing practices and standards generally. 12, that the decision to disclose information to security by a mental health care provider should be governed by the applicable legislation and professional and ethical standards, bearing in mind that reporting may affect the therapeutic relationship. The decision to disclose must also take into account the paramount duty of CSC to ensure the safety of the inmate. Service providers should be encouraged to consult with their professional governing bodies or colleagues when determining the necessity of disclosure. 13, that CSC create an institutional social worker position or positions whose responsibility will include working in consultation with local Canadian Association of Elizabeth Fry Societies and other community groups to identify, coordinate, and access available community services, including mental health services and supports. The mandate of this position would include the dissemination of information regarding the availability of and assistance with connecting to such services and supports to female inmates and staff, including contract-based clinicians. 14, that CSC be required to provide all contract physicians with copies of Commissioner's directives, including revisions to Commissioner's directives that govern their practice within the penitentiary. B, alternatives to penitentiary. We recommend 15, that female inmates with serious mental health issues and or self-injurious behaviors serve their federal terms of imprisonment in a federally operated treatment facility, not a security-focused prison-like environment. 16, that female inmates who have been identified as having serious mental health issues and or self-injurious behaviors be promptly transferred to such a facility as soon as reasonably practicable. 17, that such a facility or facilities be made available at least on a regional basis, and particularly in Ontario. It is urged that more than one federally operated treatment facility is available for high-risk, high-needs women in the event that a major conflict occurs between the inmate and staff. Furthermore, and specifically, that existing male federally operated treatment facilities be adapted to accommodate a wing for female inmates. 18, that CSC negotiate arrangements with provincial health care facilities to provide long-term treatment to female inmates who chronically engage in self-injurious behavior or display other serious mental health problems. Further, A, that the Government of Canada sufficiently and sustainably fund CSC to enter into such arrangements. B, that this will include any and all capital and operating costs associated with the establishment of such facilities. and that the accommodation and treatment of female inmates therein will be the responsibility of CSC. C, that the focus of such a facility be on the preparation for treatment of and treatment of the inmate. And D, that a female inmate with mental health issues and or self-injurious behaviors who is not consenting and or withdraws consent to treatment remain in a pre-contemplative therapeutic environment for the purpose of allowing healthcare professionals to seek her consent to treatment. 19. That decision-making with respect to the clinical management and interventions of inmates with mental health issues are made by clinicians in consultation with the inmate rather than by security management and staff. 20. That a treatment facility has the capacity to be designated as the home facility of a female inmate serving her sentence therein. 21. That such a facility in Ontario or a part thereof be designated as a Schedule I facility under the Ontario Mental Health Act. 22. That inmates in such facilities must have access to an independent patient advocate system equivalent to the advocacy system to be provided to inmates in penitentiary pursuant to these recommendations, including the newly adopted RAIA, see recommendations 73 to 75. New heading: Management of complex high-needs female inmates. We recommend 23 that a treatment team is created at the institutional level to support high-needs female inmates with a consistent and dedicated team of qualified health professionals, which will include psychiatrists, psychologists, and general practitioners, and that such a team, A, meet during the psychiatrist's regular visit at the institution in order to provide ongoing, timely, and regular care to inmates. B, support the inmate regardless of her security classification, status, or placement within the institution. C, seek input from the inmate about the efficacy of her therapeutic relationships and interventions on an ongoing basis. D, seek input from frontline staff assigned to support the inmate with mental health care needs. And E, develop management plans for the purpose of therapeutic intervention and preventative measures. This plan will take into account the inmate's past experiences of trauma and the potentially traumatic effects of being incarcerated, segregated, and or restrained, and further that such management plans are developmentally appropriate and age and gender informed. 24. That the selection of the frontline staff assigned to a female inmate will consider A, the skill and interest of the frontline staff, B, the wishes of the inmate, and C, input from the treatment team. 25. That CSC maintain a roster of external psychologists and psychiatrists to provide a second opinion regarding treatment services and or recommendations when challenging behaviors are identified. 26. That an external and independent review be conducted of the regional and national complex mental health committees to determine their efficacy and identify opportunities for improvements. New heading: Segregation and Seclusion. We recommend 27 that in accordance with the recommendations of the United Nations Special Rapporteur's 2011 interim report on solitary confinement, indefinite solitary confinement should be abolished. 28. That there should be an absolute prohibition on the practice of placing female inmates in conditions of long-term segregation, clinical seclusion, isolation, or observation. Long-term segregation should be defined as any period in excess of 15 days. 29. That until segregation and seclusion is abolished in all CSC-operated penitentiaries and treatment facilities, A, CSC restricts the use of segregation and seclusion to 15 consecutive days, that is, no more than 360 hours in an uninterrupted period. B, that a mandatory period outside of segregation or seclusion of 5 consecutive days, that is, no less than 120 consecutive hours, be in effect after any period of segregation or seclusion. C, that an inmate may not be placed into segregation or seclusion for more than 60 days in a calendar year, and D, that in the event an inmate is transferred to an alternate institution or treatment facility, the calculation of consecutive days continues and does not constitute a, quote, break, close quote, from segregation or seclusion. 30, that conditions of segregation must be the least restrictive as possible for inmates and determined on a case-by-case basis. Female inmates in segregation should, as much as possible, have access to programs, activities, and facilities, and have contact with other inmates, staff, visitors, and non-governmental organizations such as CAPES. 31. That, as a mandatory duty, the institutional head will visit all inmates in segregation, seclusion, or medical observation at least once every day, in addition to meeting with individual inmates upon their request. This meeting is not to be accomplished through the food slot under any circumstances. And, A, that on days when the institutional head is away, the visit will be conducted by the highest authority. And, B, that any such authority must report in writing to the institutional head the findings and outcomes of such visits. 32. That as a mandatory duty, a mental health professional will visit all inmates in segregation, seclusion, or medical observation at least once every day, in addition to meeting with individual inmates upon their request. This visit will pay particular attention to both the mental and physical health of such inmates, with a focus on assessing the inmate's tolerance to segregation. This meeting is not to be accomplished through the food slot under any circumstance. 33. That a sub-roster team of frontline staff is dedicated to complex high-needs female inmates in the segregation unit with a minimum of 1 or 2 consistent staff at all times. Such team will ensure comprehensive and consistent support for the inmate. 34. That CSC repeal its existing review of offenders' segregated status working day review policies and replace them with 5-day and 10-day reviews that are administered by way of consecutive calendar days. This review will focus on the inmate's needs and behaviors with the goal of returning the inmate to the general population. 35. That CSC amend its current policies to ensure that female inmates held in seclusion or mental health observation are recognized as being on segregation status and are therefore entitled to all relevant reviews. 36. That CSC make every effort to ensure that female inmates, including those in segregation or observation cells, have access to and the opportunity to meet in private with the RAIA, Office of the Correctional Investigator, Citizens Advisory Committee, non-governmental organizations, and community agencies. 37. That for the purpose of monitoring and tracking, the institutional head will notify the following bodies once any inmate has been placed in segregation or seclusion, and that they will also be responsible for conducting a yearly review. A, Women's Offender Sector. B, Mental Health Services Branch. C, Office of the Correctional Investigator. D, RHQ, members of the Regional Complex Mental Health Committee. And E, NHQ, members of the National Complex Mental Health Committee. New heading, restraints, physical and or chemical. We recommend, 38, that in the development of any new policy on the use of restraints, CSC move toward a restraint-free environment by implementing a least restraint policy, and that this recommendation is reflected in CD 843. 39. That the application of restraints must be authorized by a psychiatrist or psychologist, and that this recommendation is reflected in CD 843. 40. That any inmate placed in restraints is given one-on-one therapeutic support for the entire time in restraints, and that this recommendation is reflected in CD 843. New heading, body cavity searches. 41. We recommend that body cavity searches for female inmates may occur only in the following circumstances. A, with the consent of the inmate, or B, in the absence of consent, only in exceptional circumstances. For greater clarity, exceptional circumstances will only exist when, in the opinion of a physician, there is a risk of death or serious bodily harm to the inmate or another person, and the risk cannot be mitigated through any other reasonably available means. All examinations are to be performed by a licensed medical professional at an external medical facility in a manner most compatible with the inherent dignity of the inmate. Correctional Service of Canada staff escorting the inmate to the external facility is to request that the examination be conducted by a female. 42. For the purposes of continuity of care, the institutional psychologist is notified within 24 hours of any body cavity search conducted on a female inmate, including those in treatment facilities. New heading: Serious injurious behaviors. A. Reporting of incidents. We recommend 43. That all incidents of self-injurious behavior must be reported as such. 44. That all reports regarding incidents of self-injurious behavior, that incident reports and officer statement observation reports must contain a detailed description of the nature of the self-injurious behavior and a detailed description of any physical injury or changes in physical well-being of the inmate. 45. That all reports regarding incidents of self-injurious behavior must be forthwith distributed to and read by the following: A. The warden. B. The chief of healthcare. C. The chief psychologist. D. Women's offender sector for female inmates. Office of the Correctional Investigator. RHQ, members of the Regional Complex Mental Health Committee. G. NHQ, members of the National Complex Mental Health Committee. And H. For additional clarity, the duty to read such reports is not delegable except in circumstances when the responsible officer is on leave, and even then the responsible officer is to read such reports forthwith upon return to the institution. 46. Following each incident of self-injurious behavior, a referral for consultation form be completed by nursing staff, and a copy of the psychology assessment in relation to the incident be appended to this form, and that this package be forwarded to the institutional psychiatrist. The Chief of Healthcare will be responsible for ensuring that this package is also provided to the institutional physician. B. Responses to incidents. We recommend 47. That if frontline staff determine that immediate intervention is required to preserve life, there is no requirement that they seek authorization prior to intervening or prior to calling 911. That when an inmate is engaged in self-injurious behaviors, healthcare staff are on site on a 24-hour per day, 7-day-per-week basis to support the intervention. 49. That when an inmate is engaged in self-harming behaviors, the institutional psychologists are on call on a 24-hour per day, 7-day-per-week basis for the purpose of supporting the intervention and de-escalating the incident when deemed necessary by frontline staff. 50. That CSC develop a new, separate, and distinct model from the existing situation management model to address medical emergencies and incidents of self-injurious behavior. 51. That the situation management model not be resorted to in any perceived medical emergency. 52. That when reporting the use of force intervention to preserve life of an inmate who has self-harmed, an expedited reporting system will apply. Further, all such incidents should be reviewed within 48 hours by A. the warden, B. the chief of healthcare, C. the chief psychologist, D. the women's offender sector for female inmates, E. the office of the correctional investigator, F. RHQ, members of the Regional Complex Mental Health Committee, and G. NHQ, members of the National Complex Mental Health Committee. The review will focus on the mental health needs of the inmate, her behavior and its lethality, as well as the response of frontline staff, including its appropriateness. It will assist and support the well-being of the inmate in addition to the efforts of the institution and frontline staff. It will also include strategies to manage the inmate in a safe manner and encourage staff to exercise good judgment. 53. That CSC policies state that any item used by an inmate for self-injury be classified as contraband. 54. That any inmate engaged in self-injurious behavior must have a management plan in place within 24 hours of the first self-injurious incident, and that plan must address how staff is to respond to self-injurious behaviors. New heading, Responses to Misconduct by Inmates with Mental Health Issues. We recommend, 55, that to reduce the institutional or criminal charges laid against an inmate, CSC adopts the methods of the St. Lawrence Valley Correctional and Treatment Center model of care for disruptive or self-injurious behavior symptomatic of a mental health disorder. 56. That if a complaint is made to police in regard to alleged misconduct by an inmate with mental health issues, bracket, occurring in the context of an incident of self-injurious behavior, close bracket, the security intelligence officer will provide police with complete information. This will include A. Behavior that is alleged to have amounted to a criminal offense, B. Context in which that behavior occurred, C. Circumstances of the incident of self-injurious behavior. 57. That if criminal charge is laid in respect to alleged misconduct by an inmate with mental health issues occurring in the context of an incident of self-injurious behavior, the staff member who was not involved in the incident and is selected with input from the inmate, preferably a member of her interdisciplinary team, will A. Attend any court appearance with the inmate, B. Advise the prosecutor of his or her presence, and C. Provide any information that is required by the court to deal appropriately with the charge. New heading, Transfers/Assignments of Home Institutions. We recommend, 58, that female inmates be accommodated in the region most proximate to her family and social supports. This principle is a priority for young adults and or female inmates with mental health issues and or self-injurious behaviors. 59. That non-emergency transfers of female inmates with mental health issues and or self-injurious behaviors will occur only when it is aligned with the clinical needs of the inmate. Non-emergency transfers of female inmates with mental health issues and or self-injurious behaviors will not occur for reasons related to constraints within the institution or challenges related to the management of the inmate. 60. That subject to the above, a female inmate may be transferred to an institution or treatment facility so long as the transfer has the approval of clinicians, psychiatrist and or psychologist in the sending and receiving institutions. Prior to her discharge, a current written plan must be in place for reintegrating the inmate to her home institution. 61. That in the event a female inmate is transferred away from her home institution, the following measures will address the disadvantages that result from being detained in a location away from home. Such measures may include, but are not limited to, A. Longer visits from family or supportive persons chosen by the inmate, B. Increasing the inmate's access to family or support persons via telephone, video conference, and or webcast, e.g. Skype or FaceTime, and C. Providing the inmate's family or support persons with appropriate access to telephone, video conference, and or webcast when they are unable to visit the inmate due to financial restrictions. 62. That in the event of a transfer, an inmate's patient medical file accompanies her during the transfer to ensure continuity of care. 63. That the receiving treatment team will connect with the sending institution's treatment team to share best practices, success stories, triggers, and recommendations. 64. That CSC create and implement an electronic medical database to facilitate access to medical information between sending and receiving penitentiaries and treatment facilities. 65. That no transfer occurs on a Friday or holiday given the reduced number of on-site staff at these times. New heading, transition protocol for young adults. We recommend 66 that CSC establish separate and distinct programs and services for young adults, that is 18 to 21-year-olds within adult institutions, which will be geared toward their cultural and developmental needs, e.g. educational, vocational, therapeutic, as appropriate, to specific needs and situations. 67, that CSC develop training to prepare staff to recognize and respond to the particular issues faced by young adults housed in adult institutions. 68, that CSC develop a transition protocol that begins before a young adult is placed in or transferred to an adult institution and which has the following features. A, provides clear and structured process for transition, which is understood by incarcerated young adults and institutional management and staff. B, provides guidance on roles and responsibilities for those involved in the transition process. C, provides guidance on identifying needs and sharing information during the transition process. And D, helps build relationships between young offenders and adult institution in order to support the continuation of care. New heading, Contact with Family for Young Adults. We recommend 69 that CSC facilitate, support, and document at minimum weekly communications by A, increasing the inmate's access to family or support persons via telephone, video conference, and or webcast, e.g. Skype or FaceTime, and by providing the inmate's family with or support persons with appropriate access to telephone, video conference, and or webcast when they are unable to visit the inmate due to financial restrictions. 70. That CSC streamline the approval process for visits and contact with families and support persons of young adults. In particular, it will be conducted at a national level such that their families and support persons are not subjected to repeated approval processes at each institution. 71. That healthcare professionals advise young adults of the benefits of providing consent to disclose health information to their families or support persons. 72. That at an institutional level, young adults are consulted on an ongoing basis to determine if their needs for particular activities and programs are being met. New heading, Oversight. A, internal mechanisms. We recommend 73 that CSC implement an independent RAIA for all inmates, regardless of security classification, status, or placement. The institution will be responsible for advising all inmates of the existence of and of their right to contact the RAIA. That the RAIA will be responsible for providing advice, advocacy, and support to the inmate with respect to various institutional issues, including A, transition into institutions, B, transfers, C, security classification, status, or placement, D, parole and release eligibility, including escorted and unescorted absences, E, temporary absences, F, use of restraints, physical and chemical, G, seclusion and segregation, H, complaints and grievances, I, consent to treatment and capacity to consent, J, consent to medication, including available alternatives, K, consent to disclosure of information, and L, institutional and criminal charges. 75. That inmates are protected from reprisals relating to contacting the RAIA and exercising their rights. B, external mechanisms. We recommend 76. That the Citizen Advisory Committee have unrestricted and unannounced access to local CSC-operated institutions at any time and be provided with the opportunity to speak with any female inmate, including those in segregation. These discussions will take place in private, out of the hearing of staff. 77. that citizen advisory committees are required to publish annual reports and that the CSC facilitate the publication of these reports on their website. 78, that non-governmental organizations, including CAFES advocates, have broad access to local CSC-operated institutions at any time and be provided with the opportunity to speak with any female inmate, including those in segregation. These discussions will take place in private, out of the hearing of staff. New heading, Safety and Security. We recommend 79, that CSC improve the layout of the electronic control panel that opens pod and segregation doors to minimize human error. Specifically, do not have segregation buttons directly beside pod buttons. New heading, Ethics/Whistleblower Protection. We recommend 80, that an enhanced Code of Ethics be created that explicitly applies to all Correctional Service of Canada employees from the Commissioner down to frontline staff, and that this enhanced code will A. Address preservation of life. B. Include provisions with the following language. Staff should be allowed to refuse to follow orders or directions without fear of discipline or reprisal, whether they are right or wrong, as long as there was an air of reality to the ethical/legal objection. C. Include a provision that affirms the right of all CSC staff members to report an order they believe to be illegal without fear of reprisal. D. Include a provision that addresses the individual accountability of all CSC staff and management. For example, 1. Quote, prison staff at all levels shall be personally responsible for and assume the consequences of their own actions, omissions, or orders to subordinates. And E. Include a provision that addresses the obligation of all CSC staff to respect and protect everyone's right to life, the obligation to ensure the full protection of the health of persons in their custody, and the obligation to secure immediate medical attention whenever required. 81. That this enhanced Code of Ethics be taught in core and management training. Additionally, refresher courses will be conducted at the institutional level for all CSC staff, contract and otherwise. 82. That all management are responsible and held accountable for ensuring that this enhanced Code of Ethics is communicated to their staff. New heading, Policy Development. We recommend 83, that inmates who have experienced mental health issues within correctional systems be involved in planning, research, training, and policy development with respect to the provision of mental health care for female inmates. 84, that CSC repeal the section dealing with involuntary admission and treatment in CD 803, or revise it to conform with community medical practices to ensure equivalency of care for inmates, specifically that CSC revise or repeal the requirements that A physician must assess a patient in person before providing orders for involuntary medical treatment, and B, all orders for involuntary health intervention be made in writing. 85, that CSC establish separate and distinct policies for young adults, that is, 18 to 21-year-olds, within adult institutions, which will be geared toward their cultural and developmental needs, e.g. educational, vocational, therapeutic, as appropriate to specific needs and situations. New heading, Staff Burnout. We recommend 86, that upon recognizing burnout in themselves, staff are responsible for raising their concerns to management, and further that management is responsible for acting upon these concerns and facilitating support. 87, that to alleviate pressures and avoid staff burnout, the institutional head implements mandatory, regularly scheduled respite intervals to frontline staff who primarily deal with complex, high-needs inmates. New heading, Training and Education. We recommend 88, that CSC develop training to prepare staff to recognize and respond to the particular issues faced by young adults housed in an adult penitentiary. 89, that managers and frontline staff who are delegated to support high-need female inmates with mental health and/or self-injurious behaviors be offered training in the following areas. A, fundamentals of mental health issues and self-injurious behaviors. B, first aid, CPR, current certifications based on community standards. C, impacts of segregation on mental health, including that of young adults. D, trauma-informed care, e.g. post-hostage taking. And E, medical distress and its intervention to be delivered by an external clinician. 90, that all newly appointed wardens and deputy wardens, whether the positions be on an acting or indeterminate capacity, have weekly mentoring sessions with an experienced mentor. These mentoring sessions will take place for at least 1 full year to provide the mentee with guidance, advice, and support throughout their first year in their newly appointed position. Ideally, the mentor is located in a region different from the mentee. 91, that CSC provide training and education to staff on restraint minimization and de-escalation techniques, and that any such training include hearing from persons with lived experience who have directly experienced being placed in restraints. That CSC provide all management and staff with essential refresher training to ensure they maintain an appropriate knowledge and skill set to fulfill their roles and responsibilities. Authority of the new heading, Authority of the Deputy Commissioner for Women. We recommend 93 that the Deputy Commissioner for Women has direct line authority over all matters relating to female inmates. This gives clear authority and accountability to a single body that provides specialized correctional services to female inmates. 94 that female inmates' institutions be grouped under a reporting structure independent of the regions. 95, that in the formation of this new reporting structure, careful consideration be given to the assignment of new positions, specifically so that current employees' qualifications, skill sets, and competencies are considered for best fit into the newly formed positions. New heading, Research and Knowledge Transfer. We recommend 96 that CSC foster working relationships with qualified mental health professionals from academic health sciences organizations, e.g. the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, and research universities. These partnerships will focus on developing treatment strategies and therapeutic practices as supported by current literature of evidence of effectiveness, specifically for women with mental health illnesses, including those engaging in self-injurious behavior and those in segregation. 97, that CSC revitalize and continue with the research on the emergence of a third group of women who do not respond to psychotherapy or dialectical behavior therapy. 98, that CSC implement communication strategies between units conducting research at national headquarters, e.g. Research Unit and Women's Offender Sector, and local institutions to effectively disseminate information to staff through regular institutional visits. Research staff will share relevant literature on effective therapeutic interventions with healthcare, mental health staff, and senior management. 99, that CSC implement ongoing internal communication structures between frontline, mental health, and healthcare staff, as well as senior management, to effectively disseminate information. Healthcare and mental health staff will allocate time to meet and discuss relevant literature, complex cases, and effective therapeutic interventions with frontline staff and senior management. New heading, Accountability. We recommend 100 that an independent external audit be contracted by the Minister of Public Safety of CSC's compliance with this jury's recommendations. This audit will be conducted in consultation with the Office of the Correctional Investigator, and the results of such audit will be released publicly during the 2016-2017 and 2023-2024 fiscal years. 101. That the Auditor General of Canada conduct a comprehensive audit of the jury's recommendations, and that the results of such audit be released publicly in 2019-2020. New heading, Verdict and Recommendations. We recommend 102 that this jury's verdict and recommendations regarding the inquest into the death of Ashley Smith is posted in writing in every institution and treatment facility operated by the Correctional Service of Canada in a place accessible to all staff within 30 days of the receipt of the verdict and recommendations. 103. That an electronic copy of this jury's verdicts and recommendations is made available for the public on the CSC website, for staff's reference on the CSC intranet, and that staff are immediately made aware by management. 104. That the Office of the Correctional Investigator monitor and report publicly and in writing on the implementation of the recommendations made by this jury annually for the next 10 years. Madam Foreman, is what I have read your verdict? And is it the verdict of the majority of your jury? Thank you very much. Then the verdict will be received, and the members of the jury will sign the verdict page. Now I will receive the verdict by signing the verdict page. Thank you very much, Detective. Ladies and gentlemen, ladies of the jury, inquest team, and members of the public, we've come a long way in this inquest since first we sat down here almost a year ago to inquire into the circumstances of the death of Ashley Smith. That is not to speak of the years before that through which some of us and our staffs have worked on it. Yet here we all are, all that time and effort later, at the end of the process with what we all hope are a series of findings and recommendations which may actually make a better world for women like Ashley, for all inmates who are deeply troubled by the burden of mental disorder, and indeed for those who care for them. There are some things I must say before we close the inquest and end this long proceeding. First, and I'm sure I speak for all, I must again express our heartfelt condolences to Ashley's family. Their loss is one we cannot entirely comprehend, but we can say again on behalf of everyone in the community how sorry we are that this happened and how determined the public of Canada is that there be changes designed to prevent similar deaths in the future. That in itself alone is not yet a fitting tribute to Ashley, but it is what we can do for now, and we hope it will be of some comfort to them to know that the community has begun a process, the outcome of which can be a proper tribute to Ashley if those to whom the recommendations have been made do what they should do, and if the government supports them to do it. Despite the duration and thoroughness of our investigation, and despite the fact that the receipt of this verdict and these recommendations is the final step of our process, We must not deceive ourselves into thinking that this is the end of the required action. These recommendations are not the end. They are what an inquest is supposed to produce, but they are just the start of the needed reform process to the Canadian correctional system that our jury has so ably identified on behalf of the public. We have had a very long and detailed investigation with many words about this tragedy. The time for words is now over, and we look forward to action in the near future. Canadians look forward to action. Then it's important that I recognize the inestimable contribution made to the success of this inquest by outstanding public servants and others who have worked long and hard and have demonstrated the adaptability of mind to make the long and immensely complex process of dealing with this evidence happen with success. I want particularly to recognize those who made a huge contribution, but who sadly cannot be with us today to share the successful result. My late colleagues, Fred Dupre, really outstanding young Crown Counsel, and Detective Steve Talbot, both worked so hard on this matter and contributed so greatly to the just outcome, and both sadly passed away before it could come to fruition. We remember them and their great contribution very fondly. Those who conducted the first inquest did much of the investigation and formulated a great deal of information upon which this inquest has depended heavily. We thank the coroner, Dr. Bonnie Porter, and her learned counsel, Eric Stephen Morgan, for all they did. It more than launched this inquest, and it made much of what we have done easier. No investigation, and that's what an inquest is, can succeed, of course, without great investigators. In Detective Patrick Pelagiovanni, Detective Avi Fago, and Detective Mike McKenzie, we have had a team who have worked long hours, often working at strange times, to master the hundreds of witnesses, the thousands of pages, and the hundreds of hours of video we all needed to know about. Their professionalism and skill has been key to making a proper inquiry a reality. As those who have been here regularly know, we could not have held or conducted this inquest without the support of our wonderful court staff. Our court reporter, Ms. Ala Kleinberg, and occasionally replacing her, Ms. Tracy Wingrove, have served faithfully and with such good humor and forbearance in our constantly failing to speak up and talking over each other. We acknowledge and greatly thank them for all their good work. Many organizations and people have contributed their expertise to the inquest, and I gratefully acknowledge the help we have had from the Forensic Identification Support Services of the Ontario Provincial Police, the Toronto Police Service Video Services Unit, the Peel Regional Police Public Information Bureau, and the OPP Queen's Park Detachment. Think about all the experts, and especially Dr. Gary Heimovitz and Dr. Kelly Hannah-Moffat, who spent hours studying and researching the many issues and who helped us with their evidence. They also have our thanks in very large measure. We express our gratitude to the many technical experts, and particularly Larry Drew, the father of Exhibit 5, who helped us organize and present the huge volume of evidence so that we could understand it and learn from it. The work done by these and so many other people has made it possible to conclude this inquest as it has been, and on behalf of the people of Ontario and the Chief Coroner, I thank them and each and every one most sincerely. Next, I must speak of the parties with standing, and particularly counsel who have acted for them here. They've ably represented the many and widely varied points of view and interests in this matter. They have done so with the skill and tenacity required of them as barristers. They have done much more than that, however. They have recognized that in acting as counsel in an inquest, one must not only fulfill one's professional obligation to one's client, but one must work hard to become and fulfill the responsibilities of a member of an inquest team. The inquest has a job to do, and it can't do that job for the benefit of the public without forming a working team made up of all involved counsel. They don't have to agree, indeed they will often disagree strongly, but they do have to work together professionally and in the best interests and best spirit of the guidelines promulgated by the Advocate Society to work civilly and cooperatively together and to get the job done in an efficient and respectful way. This inquest has been marked by the success with which advocates have done that, and they are all to be congratulated and appreciated by everyone for having done it so well. I and the inquest are deeply grateful and hope that the public will appreciate what a great service they have rendered to it. I will look forward to working with all of them in the future. Next, I must acknowledge the support provided to the process by the Chief Coroner for Ontario, by the Deputy Chief Coroner for Inquest, Dr. Bill Lucas, and by the Chief Counsel for that office, Mr. Michael Blaine. Also by those many of my brother and sister coroners who helped me with their sage advice, their experience shared, and by covering the work I had to miss so that this process could unfold with me here. I will always remember fondly their friendship and support. The hard and good work of our clerical assistants, Valerie Chow and Justin Hawley, and of our researcher, Amanda Lowe, made a very large contribution. The contribution of the many, many involved support staff of the Office of the Chief Coroner and Chief Forensic Pathologist has been large, very much behind the scenes, and very crucial to our success. To all of them go our thanks for their support. The contribution of our coroner's constables, Detective Jim Murphy and Detective Rob McConnell, has made it happen. They have served the needs of our jury, of our counsel team, of the media, and of others so well, and with such patience. We thank them and wish them well as they leave this courtroom complex, which has served so long and so well, and move on to the new modern coroner's courtrooms. If every inquest had the support they have given us, then justice would be very well served indeed. I cannot conclude these remarks without drawing particular attention to my own counsel throughout this long inquest. Jocelyn Spire and Mark Creel are both very experienced and wise Crown attorneys with vast understanding of the long, complex criminal trial and complex jury trial, and mental health issues. It must be obvious to all, but must be particularly noted by me, how much the successful conclusion of this matter has depended on their long experience and wise counsel. Any credit for the exemplary way in which this complex inquest has been led is theirs alone. The inquest and I personally have been so fortunate to have them to depend on, and I thank them on behalf of the people we all serve, and very personally, for making this all possible. It would not have happened without them. Finally, I must thank the members of our jury. It is not possible to overestimate the personal contribution they have made to this matter. They have taken almost a year of their lives to listen to the evidence in Ashley's death, and yet they have never failed to be attentive and very involved in the process. One of the most experienced lawyers in inquest work in this province remarked to me that in all his career he had never seen so engaged and attentive a jury. And for my own part, having presided over not a few inquests myself, I most heartily agree with him. Ladies, you have served your community extremely well. The public of Ontario are in your debt, and a large part of the tribute to Ashley that we all hope will follow from this inquest is due to your engagement, your inquisitiveness, and often your tenacity. As I said, you've heard it all. You should be very proud of your work here, and the community is extremely proud of you. So, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of this very long inquest. None of us who have been closely involved will ever forget it. We hope it will lead to a better world for some persons who badly need one within the world of Canadian corrections. But the verdict is only the beginning of the needed reforms. It is an excellent template for them, and it points the way with clarity. What happens now will be in the hands of others, and frankly in the hands of the Canadian public, to insist that the right thing is done with these recommendations. I want to say what a privilege it has been for me to be selected as the coroner to preside over this complex inquest. There are many times in the life of a coroner when he or she gets to feel, as doctors always hope to, that they have helped people in a difficult time or made a contribution to the long-term betterment of a difficult problem in society. This has been one of those times for me on a very large scale, and I thank the Chief Coroner for the opportunity to serve. It remains only for me to thank everyone I may have forgotten and to mention and all of you for your support and your friendship during this long case. This concludes the inquest into the death of Ashley Smith. May she rest in peace, and may God bless her memory. In spite of the holiday, in the spirit of the holiday soon upon us or just concluded, may I end by saying, thank you all, and may God bless us, everyone. Detective Murphy, will you now give the proclamation?
Dr. Carlisle, on behalf of the Smith family, I want to say it's not my intention to show disrespect by seeking the last word, but it's a frailty I seem to have. Dr. Carlisle, on behalf of the Smith family, I want to say my professional and personal debt of gratitude to you for presiding in what is one of the most difficult proceedings I've ever had anything to do with. I couldn't make it to the end. And I want to say to you that the family is deeply indebted for the way you presided over this inquest. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Detective, you will now give the proclamation, please.
Oyez, oyez, oyez. This inquest is now closed and the jury is discharged. God save the Queen. All rise.